welcome all. Thank you for joining today's meeting. Just a quick introduction. My name is Mariano Botta. I'm based out of Miami, Florida. I've had close to about 17, almost 18 years of experience working in all kinds of integration healthcare related services, Cerner, Epic, G-Centricity, probably name a lot of old legacy systems and new upcoming systems that I'm currently working on right now. Today, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to present you with things that are very efficient in today's healthcare organization world to perform services within the organizations, either in a pre, during, or post-implementation process that could bring you a lot of good utilities and understanding of how your systems are actually performing today. If anybody else wants to add anything else to the presentation before we begin? Okay. Well, first of all, most of you guys in the healthcare industry at some point in time either have or will go through some sort of upgrade or processes of implementations within your clinical revenue cycle system. And a little bit of a history is that a lot of times what happens is everyone gets too caught up and involved in the multiple moving avenues and pieces that go into a huge implementation or upgrade of a healthcare EMR or ERP system. With that being said, a lot of times we don't really perform internal audits, or there are audits that we don't perform once and we don't continue performing them in a currently basis, and we don't get to really see or capture things that are going behind the scenes that most likely are producing some of the issues that you're seeing today in your AR, some of the issues that you're seeing on your costs, some of the issues that you're seeing with the nows, etc. So I'm going to be presenting with you guys what is
Mariano?
Kind of the core. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Can you present in presenting mode? Kind of get it a little bit small for us.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I thought.
Thank you.
Did you get better now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry. My apologies. Thank you. So the purpose of today's presentation is really to give you guys an overview of what are the values and core objectives of what an audit would look like, and what are the little tips and tricks that you guys can start thinking of doing ahead of time to prepare yourself for upcoming audits, or if you're going through an audit, what are some of the things or some of the areas that you can be also taking a look at. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start with, well, what are the values of auditing your system? Okay, so we have, I just kind of added a couple of line items here. So evaluate the actual performance of the operations compared to what was planned, okay? Validate the objective pursued by the organization remain relevant. So in this case also, this is another important topic is, once you kind of pass that vision, that process where, hey, this is what I need, or here's the system that I already have implemented and time has already passed by, there are times that we lose sight of the main objective. And is it still become relevant? And there are a lot of components to that. Does it become relevant with the system that we have right now? Have we made modifications or changes to our workflow that no longer satisfy or pretty back up the vision that we originally had or intended when we went live with the product? Or do we have new technology that is now competing, that's not making the product more relevant? The other one is just to validate whether the company is achieving those objectives, right? So that's just kind of part of understanding the data and make sure that those objectives, based on what the data that you're getting back, makes sense at this point, or you have to change course. Ensure that the system is reliable, very important. What you thought was reliable before, as time passes by, may not become reliable anymore. You may have to upgrade servers, you may have to upgrade data warehouses, etc. Review system records to ensure system operations based on specification. This is another very important one that we see a lot, and it's because there are times where you're either doing data migrations from legacy systems to the new EMR systems or ERP systems, et cetera. Or there are also times where that workflow over time starts corrupting databases. And then these things are not being cleaned up, and you start seeing issues and just things just kind of go into a chain. Identify vulnerabilities and risk. Things like pitfalls in workflows, vulnerabilities within the main frame of the system, whether it's a network, performance, conversations or bidirectional feeds between systems. Allow a company to define mitigation plan that better achieve its objective. So once you have an idea of what's happening behind the scenes and some of the things that are being brought to your attention, this will give you an understanding of how to mitigate with that. What is the next steps you have to take to ensure that these issues are resolved, to confine the process and the bottlenecks that you can have. And monitor its operational system to ensure that it meets the objective of an ongoing basis. We just don't stop in creating one audit. We now create plans to continue to monitor to ensure that these things are now accounted for and we're not acting in a reactive any kind of way. There are three main types of audits. Necessarily, some of these may have some potential deltas within each individual, but I'm just kind of going to go over the 30,000 view. But one is a process audit, which basically accounts for all processes and procedures, including review of policies, workflow validation, and how they basically work with the vision that you had and the systems that are integrated to create and produce that workflow. The next one is a product audit, which allows you to either confine one particular product that you're using or multiple products that you're using and understand how it's performing based on the specifications and standards that you provided upon that workflow or policy. And the other one is system audit, which is, this one is basically the biggest audit of all of them, which accounts for all system integrations as a whole, involved the specifications within those policies and procedures and workflows and how these systems interact with each other to make sure that from the beginning to the end, you have a workflow that is reliable within your system. Now, here are some of the areas that are mainly accounted for within revenue cycle. Charge service, and within charge service that you can delta a little bit to supply chain and other areas. Patient accounting, which accounts for anything related within patient accounting. That includes finance, general ledger, accounts receivable, collections, early out, etc. Workflow, just basically any type of workflow within any of the buckets within revenue cycle or clinical processes. Core services is really accounting for all of your system core values. So your data, your codes, individual aliases and identification services, integration, registration. So anything to do with patient access, central scheduling, scheduling itself, HIM, systems to do with coding, external coding, and scheduling is a little bit of I call it a stepchild, but scheduling is another area that's important, especially when you're kind of working together within your registration and central scheduling process. You want to ensure that you're capturing all of your schedule books correctly and things are actually falling into place. Configuration in general, so just configuration within the actual host system itself. Make sure that the data migration is good. Elements within the tables are actually correct and not corrupted. And then another one that is kind of like overseen a lot, but it's very important, is the system integration aspect. It's making sure that within all these buckets that you have in front of you, you have most likely a lot of other systems that are bolt-on or systems that you're either using outbound or inbound integration. So you want to make sure that your data the content within your data is correct and that your integration is working sufficient. Right. Any questions so far? Concerns? So I have just brought a couple of examples of audits that we've performed in the past that I think that are probably good examples for me to show you guys. This was an audit in the charge service point. As you can see here, there was a total for this particular scenario, it's a total of 6,800 bill items that were associated with a clinical charge capture event, but they didn't have any price schedule set up. And what the impact on this is really, and when we start looking into your charge masters, or we start looking into how you guys are, capturing charges based on clinical events, we want to make sure that you are capturing every potential chargeable clinical event and you have a price associated with it. So in this particular case, the client thought that they were doing really good. And in fact, their daily revenue average was actually declining for quite some time. And it's because when they switched systems, they just did one audit and they didn't get to audit recurrently after that. So as new items and new bill item IDs were being billed, they were not being associated correctly within those clinical events, and they were not given correct price schedules. So again, that could really affect your KPIs, your average rate revenue, and cash workflow. So that's a pretty good example of that one. Another one, the same avenues with bill items relationship to. In this one, there was a total of like 1,300 bill items that had a price schedule, but were never linked to a charge point event. And this one is a little bit tricky because when you look into the charge, you see it, somebody that audits your charge master may see that the charges have bill item IDs and they look great. They're like, okay, we'll have charges here that have bill item IDs. But when you do a very deep audit and you make sure that every single bill item is marked or associated with a clinical disconnect. And this was a good one because that means that they had 1,300 bill items, actual charges that were priced and that had no clinical event associated with it. That means they were performing these clinical services and charging anything because they were not linked together. So this was a huge revenue leakage that was also causing them some KPIs issues. Bill items with zero price schedule. Okay. Sometimes there's a lot of these that you will see in entities. They're normally used for statistics. Sometimes they're bundle or what's called parent to child charges. But we normally try to look into what our experiences have shown. There's about an average of about 10,000 per facilities. And normally these are facilities that are kind of apples to apples comparison. In this particular case, we saw about 35,000. And we were able to identify particular areas like radiology, lab, emergency, and supplies that were actually being accounted for and rendered within surgery departments that had a zero price schedule associated to it. And these were all causing the hospitals millions of dollars of charges that were being rendered, or services that were rendered but were never captured, or at least not priced, to put it for lack of better words. Other areas now that are a little bit outside of charge services are like your claims, okay? And that's another very important area because it truly affects the cash flow, the claim rejection rate, denials, and even most important, your discharge not final bill numbers. Normally within your health and scrubber, you have a particular amount of money that are sitting there that should average, depending on what, how you guys have or account for the amount of average in dollars that's sitting your DNFBs unique to every client. But things like, invalid claim rules or claim rules that don't have correct criteria. I see very, very often clients that have been, with a system for over 2 to 3 years and do not change or review their claim rules. But the funny part about that is that we all know that, at least in the States, for example, insurance companies are constantly changing the environment. Geographically, they're changing how they pay you, how they adjudicate claims, There's state rules and regulations that also modify and change all the time. And most of the times we're not making changes to the actual core system to alleviate those modifications and kind of go with the flow. But instead, what we're seeing is an adaptation of manual workarounds and workflows because issues are being presented and they're just kind of being addressed as we go. And it's causing hospitals millions of dollars, during a long period of time of all the manual work effort, overtime, etc., just because simply they have rules that are no longer sufficient with the changes that either governments or insurances have made during the time. So again, these are something important that for you guys to take a look at. Organizations that are incomplete, I see this a lot. This is actually a very simple, yet a very, very common mistake that we see in a lot of clients. Is we see clients that have all these locations, clinics, etc., but then the build, for whatever reason, is not completed. And then they start wondering why invoices are not getting to the payers or why the payers are having contractual issues. And it's because most of them are not completed. They don't have complete addresses. Sometimes they don't have the correct MPI number, taxonomy code number. So even though this may seem like a little bit of ordinary, we do see it quite a bit. So it's important to just kind of make sure that you're looking into your organization, how your organization credentials are being accounted for. Denials. Denials is a pretty big topic. I think that in the past couple of years is getting a little more attention. But there's a lot of times where we're seeing denials that are not mapped correctly with the standards. So you have like ANSI codes that are being mapped as technical denials where they're not technical denials and they're, provider responsibility or they're patient responsibilities, and you have them as technical denials and vice versa. And then obviously no one is really paying attention to the way that these are being mapped for ones. But when they're creating analytical workflows behind denial management, they're trying to understand why the technical denials are so high, or while their provider liability is so high. And it's because a lot of the times the denials ANSI codes are not properly configured. So you're overstating certain areas of your denial management, and then therefore you're thinking that you have more denials than what you really have in one bucket versus the other one. So again, this could be conflicting with your AR aging. Could create problems in your AR because these could be technical denials that are you're posting via 835 or even manual posting that are not taking the correct adjustments. And therefore you're basically aging that gross dollar amount or leftover cash within your accounts receivable. Denial codes not in sync. These are other areas that we're seeing where denial codes are not in sync within the actual configuration of the denials itself. So, for example, I'm going to give you for this particular example, I'm going to give you Cerner because Cerner, it's most of the times, 90% of the times, I've seen this within Cerner clients. And the issue here is that when the denials are being created or new denials are being configured in the system, they're not being synced with the correct code value sets. So that is actually triggering off issues when you're posting payments or when you're creating reports. Because what happens is either one, you can overpost the denials incorrectly, or you might not have even the denials available for posting. So therefore, when you're trying to post a payment and the denial is not there and you have a crosswalk that is not matching, you end up with a bunch of 835 issues, or you have technically line items within the 835s that are not posting electronically, and that's causing your team to have to manually go in there and manually post them, and then ultimately creates human error as well, right? So that's another area that we've seen a lot of issues lately. In the health plan part of it, a lot of these come in from an authenticated status. So This is more likely when you're doing a legacy system to a brand new system and you have to do data migration. There are times where, that legacy system was running for, say, 14, 15 years. And we basically had all these insurances and insurance health plans in your legacy system over time, and were really never cleaned up, right? And when you do a data migration, you're moving all this data now into your new EMR system, and now you have the new health plan master along with a bunch of other stuff that you brought in from the system. And what happens is that sometimes we don't pause or stop to say, hey, do we really need all this? Or should we clean everything up after we do a data migration? And then clients more often don't do that. And then what's happening is that you get multiple issues in different areas. You have patient access that is picking insurances that visually they look the same. Like you could have an unauthenticated Blue Cross Blue Shield that came from your old system and a regular Blue Cross Blue Shield that is from your new EMR system. Visually, they both look the same. They don't have a flag that says unauthenticated or anything like that. So what's happening is they're picking that Blue Cross Blue Shield thinking that it's all good. And then that Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't have any criteria or configuration behind the scenes. And it's causing you billing issues because they don't have like the national code, health plan code. They don't have the cert ID number to create 835s electronically. You're having issues with eligibility because you don't have your eligibility identification number. You can pretty much name how many issues this is causing when you're not doing an audit for cleanup after data migration. So just wanted to bring that up as well. Health plans with duplicate name, I think that kind of goes hand in hand, but you can kind of see it here a little bit better. It's, again, was giving the whole Blue Cross Blue Shield example, but in this case, you have two Humanas, both unauthenticated, and then you have a Humana that is a verified. So if I was, again, I'm that, register in the front picking Humana, all I'm going to see is this, right? So I see three Humanas. I don't know which one am I going to pick. I'm definitely going to pick one, and there's going to be times where they might pick the right one, and there's times when they might pick the wrong one. Health plan with no business address is another one that we're seeing. Again, just another quick example of how these data migrations can come through, or even how sometimes, even with the new EMR system, as they're building the insurance master, how some of these health plans can actually be allocated without the correct information. Health plans with no financial class association. I see this a lot as well. This is a direct cause that can really affect your financials. In this case, for mainly general ledger. So a lot of you guys that are in the finance sector, and you probably are aware, once you create your general ledger tree, you want to associate your revenue, your contract AR, your contract revenue, your accounts receivable, and bad debt. You definitely want to associate it along your financial classes. And when you have all these health plans that are not associated with financial classes, and you are receiving payments, generating revenue, etc., you're having to cut off that from your general ledger. So you end up having unassociated monies just kind of sitting in your general ledger without knowing what financial class was associated with. Insurance without TRN values. Again, I think that this goes kind of back in hand. TRN segments are used for 835 posting. A lot of times you want to make sure that when you are creating new insurances in your systems, you're making sure that your IT department or whoever is responsible for that process is adding the correct TRN segments. This happens all the time. And when we come in, we audit clients, we see that we have hundreds sometimes of insurance health plans that don't have TRN segments. And we ask them, so what are you doing about this? Oh, we're posting manually. Again, creating more human error, more costs and value for humans to actually perform something that could be done electronically. Also, in the credentialing area, we've seen also a lot of indiscrepancies with, for example, either persons, users, or in this case, physicians. And again, these are physicians that are, either attending. Sometimes they're non-staff, sometimes they're medical residents. We have all types of physicians but are basically performing services within the facility as active physicians and do not have a correct or even MPI numbers. So this is a one-to-one relationship with how you're going to get paid in your claims in the UB04 or 1500. If you don't have an MPI number for a physician, you're going to get an error. In addition to that, from a contract management perspective, in the provider fee sector, physicians that don't have the MPI number are probably going to have issues with contract services as well. This is another pretty big issue that we're seeing, I would say, in every single facility that we've ever audited. Voided benefit orders. A lot of you guys probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to give you kind of a quick, brief explanation. Whenever charges are being accrued and you create basically the claim has or is associated with something called the benefit order. What happens is that most of the time, when you have a streamlined system that works in the revenue cycle from front to end, because it's all joined together, you're going to have scenarios where you've already seen a patient, you've already charged or rendered services and therefore created charges, and somehow after the fact, retroactively, someone either in the front, patient access, or someone in patient financial services will modify something in the patient's account, like will remove a health plan, will modify or change the financial class. This is causing benefit orders to get voided. In other words, to become inactive or to become corrupted in the tables. And what that is because when you modify something that's already posted, you basically rip off or disconnect tables that are joining in the back to create that link between charges, the relationship to a clinical encounter, and the relationship to a health plan. We see this in a very high volume. And the bad part about this is that this happens all the time and people just don't know about it. Because everyone, even though they might be working in the same system, also could be working in silos. Meaning I'm in patient financial services and I'm just kind of billing claims every day, following up on insurances. And even on the same accounts that I have, someone else or customer service agent might be getting a call, hey, I need to change my insurance, and they make the changes to the insurances. I have no idea. I come in there, I see that there's payment, but I get to the point where when I look at the account, I may see a payment posted into a benefit order, a balance, and I cannot move the payment, or I have credits stuck there and I can't move them around. Why? Because behind the scenes, that balance is inactive. This happens a lot, and it happens in very, very, very large volumes. Normally, if the client is being in the system for a longer time, you kind of see the volume obviously increase. We've seen clients in the 20-something thousand balances, and they have millions of dollars in credits within those benefit orders that are stuck in there, and they can't really move them around. So we do a pretty good job reviewing them and doing a cleanup process for them so they can actually move those monies around and reduce either the AR days because they're able to move that money around, etc. All right. Again, these are some of the examples that I have for you guys. There's obviously a ton, but we'll need maybe 4 additional hours to talk about everything else that goes into audits and, but I think the most important was really to bring to your attention some of the things that you can look into that are not very, very complicated, in my opinion, in terms of you don't have to really dig too deep into the configuration, but some of the things that are just very, very clear to the daily or day operations use. Again, health plan, claims, charges, things like that, that if you start just kind of auditing those things recurrently, you can get away from having to have issues in the future, like revenue leakage, problems with cash flows, etc. So any questions you guys may have, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then I'll let you guys take over.
Great, thank you so much, Mariano. So if anyone wants to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, or if you want to type something in the chat, I can read that out if you prefer.
Could be anything not related to audits. If you guys have any issues, maybe you're having an issue today that you want to talk about, maybe I can help you with it, give you some advice.
Maybe a quiet group today.
I don't have any particular questions. I appreciate the information because we've just started our rev cycle conversion project. So this was really great to have some background of things to look out for.
Yeah, if you're kind of in the middle of your revenue cycle process of configuration now, pay good attention at those DCWs. May I ask what system are you going in with for revenue for EMR?
So we're Cerner, and then we're moving toward the Cerner full suite for rev cycle and financials.
Okay, excellent. So again, I tell this to all my clients is the more aware you become of your integration before you go live, the better off you're going to be post go live. There's a lot of moving pieces that go in place, but make sure that you take a quick look at your DCWs. For some of you guys who don't know so those are data collection workflows. Normally with Cerner, you're going to get that to be requested from the client. Make sure you look into the information that you're putting in there. Make sure that the build is going to be correct. And normally what I tell my clients is during the validation process, there's usually a phase that goes from DCW configuration to client validation. And that means that the client now is responsible to validate that the configuration based on those DCWs are correct. Now, I will tell you this, a lot of the times you're not going to see that validation from a back-end perspective, right? You're going to see kind of, the front face of it. You're going to open revenue cycle, make sure that things look good, but you're not really going to see the things that I'm showing you in the back. So it'll probably be very beneficial that you guys, before your integration testing 1 or integration testing 2, if you haven't gotten there yet, you do a quick configuration audit to ensure that everything that you provided to them is exactly as it was configured before you get into that integration testing. Otherwise, what happens is we start seeing clients just kind of become very, very concerned with the time frame of go live, starting to have issues during their integration testing, and then they basically have a very small period of time frame, and they become very, very reactive, and that kind of changes their mindset and switches the focus of clients from making sure that things that were meant to be put in place before go live are there and are working correctly to kind of like start putting out fires. We see that a ton of times. So just, FYI, kind of keep a look at that.
Yeah, Mariano, if I could add to that, and Steve, thank you for that great question. I'm Jeff Tennant from ROI, by the way. I'm a vice president of our HS Services and Strategy Group. But as you look at the configuration and the the technical component of that transition to the Cerner Revenue Cycle platform, the process design and the process things behind that, I think, are extremely important as well. And that's that's one of the things we here at ROI, along with Mariano, try to bring to the table, is looking at both the people side of it, the process side of it, and the technology side, and really kind of bringing those three components together to make sure that as organizations go through these types of transitions, that they are doing the best they can possibly do for their organization. And Steve, it sounds like you're going through a transition period now. and the planning and building of the system, as Mariano alluded to, is extremely important. I mean, all the systems work extremely well if they're designed and implemented correctly, right? Where we tend to fall short is putting the effort into the design, putting the effort into making sure the processes feed the system as it's intended to be fed, and then making sure that the technical component is implemented properly and that things are considered. So I think, it's a great question, Steve. And I think as you're going through this, keep those things in mind. If there's any way we can be of assistance to you, we'd love to. But those things are very, very important as you look at this transition period.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we've just started our journey, so we're still doing some of the foundational data collection, and so we have a long way to go. But I appreciate the feedback.
All right, any other questions? And I did, there was one question in the chat that I answered about the recording being available. So we will post this out to our community site after the session. It'll probably get posted next week.
One thing that I would probably tell everyone, this is kind of a personal model that I kind of like to share with everyone, and I want everyone to share it with your peers, is anytime you're going in through an implementation, or even after, is keep an open mind and become very curious, okay? Ask questions, even if you feel like they are dumb questions or stupid questions or might be either relevant or irrelevant, because some of the things that we're seeing after we come, after an implementation has already been put in place, and we're kind of getting in there because the client is now aggravated because of issues that have kind of arise, is the client did not ask a lot of the questions because you have that, I don't know what I don't know, right? We get that. But then there's times where the client is not asking questions because they take whatever the system integration host is, in this case, Cerner or Epic or whatever, they take whatever they say as gospel, okay? And you guys probably hear a lot of, well, we're going to design the system the way that the system comes out of the box because that's model. Sometimes you guys might hear that word, model. Well, model doesn't work for everyone, okay? And it is something that we're seeing very, very, very often within our client population, is we're seeing a shift where they didn't ask the right questions. They ended up kind of putting whatever the system host was telling them to do, and not really to cater to what they needed. And then a year or 2 years later, they find themselves in this, pitfalls where their system is not doing what they were supposed to do, or they're having to create multiple workarounds to kind of calm the bleeding or relieve the issues, and they're now falling into a pretty bad situation. So again, if you can get it there before it's too late, ask as many questions as you can. And if you feel that you're not getting the answers, then we're here to assist you. You're more than welcome to let us know. My email is available, and you can reach out to me or the team, and we can try to figure something out for you guys to make sure that you guys get your answers.
Mariano, great response there. And I guess one question I would have is we're talking to this group, and these are all Cerner clients. A lot of what you talked about today was focused on pre-implementation, but after the fact, right, a year or 2 years in, what are some of the areas that you typically see that need adjustment or need to be really refined?
Yeah, so I say that the most common areas that need refined are patient access, and then I would say patient access and patient accounting. And then patient accounting, I'll probably leave this one. I'll break it up in different areas. But patient access, funny story is I do have I'm not going to share who it is, but I do have an active client right now that's been with Cerner for just about 2 years. and they're having a very, very tough time trying to get things or basically have registration conversations work correctly. Well, the bottom line is that, you know, they created a monster of a maintenance problem within their registration conversations, thinking that they were all doing these things correctly, but rather were not. And a lot of it is because, again, you know, lack of not asking the right questions, not pushing, you know, the whole system to bring them reference points to some of the answers, you know, and then just kind of took it for what it is, and that it was causing them a ton of problems, which basically relates to claim issues and denials. And then the other area really within patient accounting, or kind of the patient financial services process too, is again, we'll talk about the claims. Like, claim rules are not being updated. You know, a couple of years pass by, and you know, you still have the same claim rules, you know, for Medicaid, or same claim rules for you know, for Medicare or commercials, and then you look into your contracts and you really read them, and some of your contracts have completely changed, and some of your CPT codes have changed, and these changes are not being made. But rather, they're just kind of, you know, working through the motions, because obviously you have the day-to-day operations, and it's falling behind. And then same thing with again, you know, the voided benefit orders is a huge thing. I kind of say over and over again, because clients are just kind of becoming aware of that just now. We've seen in the past, I would say 3 years, we've seen it more than a dozen clients, and we've helped them out with that. And it's been an incredible journey with them, for them to understand what's happening. Variances, I think that a lot of clients are not really using the correct workflows. I still see a lot of clients that when we ask them, you know, they spend millions of dollars in this new EMR system, and you know, we come in 2 years later, 3 years later, and then we ask them, okay, so how do you work in your HR balance? How you're working your accounts? And believe it or not, sadly, they said, oh, we print out an ATB and we spread it out, and they're working out of a paper ATB or of an Excel spreadsheet of an ATB to actually do workflows, where in today's now-and-day technology, they have work queues and work items and automated systems that could actually deliver information between, you know, users to define workflows. And the main reason why some of them just don't use it is because of a bad configuration at the beginning, and they just get tired of things not working the way they want to, and they just don't use it. And it's sad, because you spend a lot of money on doing that, and you're not really using the system to its, you know, optimal capacity. So I would say those are kind of the things that we're seeing then.
Yeah, very good point. I think I've always said the 6 most expensive words in healthcare is "we've always done it that way," right? You put a new system in and put the old processes on it, and it just doesn't, you know, you're not maximizing that ROI. You're absolutely correct. No, that's a great point, and that's why we here at ROI take that holistic approach of looking at the processes, looking at the system configuration. I don't know if any other audience members have any questions. If not, I have one more I'd like to throw at Mariano, but I wanted to give everyone else a chance to ask questions if they have any. Okay, one more for you, Mariano. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Hi. Mariano, thanks for your presentation. It was very informative. My question to you is, what do you believe to be the root cause of audits that reveal significant revenue cycle issues? And the follow-up question is, what have you experienced as far as organizations remediating the root cause of their problems in the areas you mentioned, as far as workflows and all these other things?
Yeah, I think the number one issue is really just configuration. But when I say configuration, I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding, because configuration comes from an act of either bad workflow that was presented to get configured, or configuration that was incorrectly or erroneously put into the system mistakenly. Okay. It is good to understand the difference between those two, because there's a lot of times where we go in there and we say, okay, yeah, your configuration is wrong, but we need to make sure the client understands why is it wrong, and it was this something that was wrong because it was, the client had it correctly, or the client had an understanding of how the configuration should have been, and it was never accounted for in that matter, or was it because the client actually wanted that configuration to be done that way because they didn't understand any other way that could have been done better. Okay, but ultimately it comes down to configuration. It's causing issues. And the other one will be workflow. Again, it's kind of like what Jeff indicated a little bit earlier, is we've always done things this way, right? And then you still kind of want to carry that same old workflow with your new EMR system, and you're not taking enough advantage of what your new EMR system can do for you. Therefore, so you're falling short in the workflows, and you're not really seeing that big push or impact on your return. How do we remediate those things? Is, well, after we review the process with the client, and we understand exactly, we have a good understanding, and the client has a good understanding of what we're seeing. The next steps is really just to, if it's something that's configured, we'll reconfigure it. We'll put an action plan together for the client that will have multiple phases, depending on how big of the project is in terms of that. And it goes to the point of reconfiguring, correcting what's wrong, passing education in both the technical aspect of what we change in the configuration so that the client can be independent. And what I mean by independent is we want to make sure that we leave the client with enough knowledge on how to change anything in the future, how to continue to review their system to make sure that the system is running correctly, and how to maintain those processes moving forward. And the next process will be the education at the non-technical level, which will be anything that we modify technically that is changing or has changed the way that the workflow was perceived originally. Then we'll need to document that and work with the client to make sure that they understand what the new workflow will look like and how to start looking into the future for possible changes in the workflow as you change terrains and how things are changed around you. And again, so some of these processes are a little bit different how we go about them, but they all kind of end up in that process: is we verify, we validate, we execute, and we educate.